Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing here on May the 11th. Live coming to you on, where are we? We're on New Zealand Sports Radio. That's where we are, coming to you at 8 a.m. every single morning. And today in the news, we have a third player in the EPL for Brighton has tested positive for COVID-19 despite all of their measures. We have a surprise win in the UFC. NRL are poised to seal a 7-year, $2.3 billion broadcast deal. We also have updates from Major League Baseball, from the America's Cup, from greyhound racing, and also from skateboarding. It is a very varied show this morning. But I think at the top, we should probably kick off with that UFC news. Stephen.
Yes, good morning, Paul, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, what a action-packed day it was yesterday. UFC 249, and we've pretty much got the cards and results right here in front of us. Of course, the main fight, Tony Ferguson's planned UFC 249 fight with lightweight champion Russian Khabib Nurmagomedov fell apart. Fans were given the ultimate consolation prize, an interim title fight between Ferguson and Justin Gauthier. And while there was no crowd in attendance, apart from the trainer, media and officials, the fight did not disappoint with, I think the images you're just seeing at the minute, there's looks like Ferguson copping one from Gauthier. Gauthier took full advantage of the opportunity, battering Ferguson over 5 rounds of action before scoring a late TKO to collect the championship belt at the VY Star Veterans Memorial Arena, Jackson, Florida. So there you have it. So it did not disappoint. Just looking at the rest of the card, working our way backwards from the pre-fights. Henry Cujo of Los Angeles, California, defeated Californian Dominic Cruz via a second-round TKO in the flyweight division. In the heavyweight division, Francis Ngannou of Cameroon defeated Gia Rosna-Struck of Suriname via first-round TKO punches. And going through to the next round in the featherweight division, Calvin Kattar, the 32-year-old from Newton, Massachusetts, defeated fellow American Jeremy Stevens via a second-round knockout with an elbow doing the damage in the featherweight division. Just looking a bit further on in another heavyweight division, Greg Hardy from Millington, Tennessee, defeated the man from Cape Verdean, Jorgen De Castro, via a unanimous decision. Now, just a couple of little footnotes in and around Hardy. Hardy was a professional footballer, having represented the Carolina Panthers, Dallas Cowboys, and he also did a bit of a stint with the Richmond Rough Riders as a defensive end in the American Arena League. In 2018, it was announced that Hardy would make his professional debut at Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series on June 12th. He fought fellow former NFL defensive end Austin Lane and won by a knockout in the first round. Afterwards, he was awarded a contract by a UFC. Now, this guy is a very interesting character, got a very, very checkered history in and around violence. If you think some of the guys out of the NRL are some bad boys, this fella is a nasty piece of work. Now, a fight that I tuned in yesterday was Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone, who are very, very good friends, and it kind of looked that way at times. After each round, they gave each other a hug and a high five, but it got a bit nasty in the third round when Cerrone claimed he got a poke in the eye from Pettis, and that just seemed to ignite the fight. And but it was Pettis who came away taking what was a very, very good fight. At least their faces still looked intact, unlike some of the other fights. Now, in the battle of the 42-year-olds in the heavyweight division, Alexei Olnick from Ukraine defeated Fabrico Werdum from Brazil via a split decision. The female fight of the day, which is the strawweight division. Now, you're wondering what the strawweight division is? That's the 48 to 50 kg weight limit. And Esperanza beat her fellow American Michelle Waterson via a split decision. Now, in a fight that was something like out of a good grief, a bad assault, Vincent Lequic, the Brazilian-born American, defeated Nico Price from Florida via a third-round TKO. Now, his injuries were so horrific that the doctor pretty much stopped the fight. It doesn't make for good viewing, let me tell you, if those images are up. In last two fights in the featherweight division, Bryce Mitchell of the US defeated fellow American Charles Rosa via unanimous decision. And in the very, very first fight of that day, Ryan Spann from Memphis, Tennessee, defeated American Sam Alvey via a split decision. I hope you weren't having your breakfast while those images were up, folks, but that's all the news we have in UFC, Paul.
Thank you very much for that update, Stephen. And we're going to move on now to the football, where we had overnight, we had the completion of the Belarusian league weekend's games. Neyman Grodno lost to Rua Brest 2-4. Ishlash beat Belashina 2-1. Verbesk and Stratfor drew for a 0-0 draw. In a high-scoring game, Smolovenich lost 3-5 to Bate, and Dynamo Brest beat Dynamo Minsk 2-1, which will please Arswin, who has joined us. What that means then is that Bete have gone top of the league. So congratulations to them, pushing both Sluts and Torpedo down a place. The two teams supported by myself and Stephen from the deep south. So good result for them over there. Belashina and Smilovic still have not recorded their first wins of the season down at the bottom there. Even though Smilovic scored 3 goals this weekend, they let in 5. So their attack has improved, but they're still letting in more goals. So they've scored half their goals. They've only scored 6 goals all season, and they scored 3 goals this weekend. Moving on to other football news, and a third Brighton and Hove Albion player has tested positive for coronavirus. 2 tested earlier, but I think earlier in the pandemic. Brighton Chief Executive Paul Barber says it is a concern, despite all the measures that we've been taking over the past few weeks, where the players haven't been involved in any significant training at all. We've still suffered another player testing positive for the virus. So yes, responding to the news of Norwich's 22-year-old midfielder Tom Cantwell said, "We're just people too." That is very true. You are just people, but you're also people who are being put in supposedly these bubbles, which mean that you're trying to get the game to return. But more and more issues there, clearly getting that to return. It is a precarious restart, and Steve Parish, the Crystal Palace chairman, says Project Restart may fail. That it could be a very, very extended period before the top flight returns if they can't find a way to make it happen soon. That obviously they're looking over at the Bundesliga example, who have, I say, where over there, remember we talked about Borussia Dortmund had gone into self-isolation for a week ahead of kickoff next weekend, because they've had players test positive earlier. They carried out 1,724 tests last week in the Bundesliga, returning 10 positive results. So, look, a lot of effort clearly going in to getting the sport back on the pitch. I'm going to hand you over back now to Stephen for our birthdays.
Thank you, Paul. And birthdays today, the older brother of a North Harbour speedster, a Commonwealth Games weightlifter, and finally the last known All Black from Whanganui, Andrew John Donald, born this day, the 11th of May, 1957, in Whanganui, is a former New Zealand Rugby Union player. A halfback, Donald represented Whanganui at provincial level and was a member of the New Zealand national side, the All Blacks, from 1981 to 1984. Donald, who turns 63 today, played 20 matches for the All Blacks, including 7 internationals. The halfback also made 118 appearances for Whanganui and may have been the last man to have pulled on the All Black jersey from the now Heartland province. Moving on, Saxon Gregory Hunt, born this day, 11th of May 1993, is a New Zealand male weightlifter competing in the 85 kg category and representing New Zealand at international competitions. Gregory Hunt, who turns 27 today, participated at the 2014 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, Scotland, finishing a creditable 9th placing. And finally, Luatangi Lee, born this day, the 11th of May 1991 in New Zealand, is a rugby union player who has played for the Blues and Super Rugby. His playing position is prop. Lee, who turns 29 today, was named in the Blues squad for week 4 in 2019 after playing only 8 games for North Harbour in the 2018 Mitre 10 Cup season. Lee is also the older brother of North Harbour Blues and Highlanders winger Tavita Lee. And I've got to say, at 120 Ks, he may not have been the fastest, but he was the fastest to the dinner table.
Wow. Yes, very true, Stephen. And happy birthday to all of them. And let's hope he shares his cake with some other people rather than eating it all himself. And we're going to hand over now to Ashwin, who'll take us through our cricket update.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to everybody, and hope you've had a good weekend. I don't know if it varies a hell of a lot from the normal days at the moment. But anyway, on to the cricket news. So Chappelli wants more law changes. On the back of law changes around ball maintenance being mooted, Ian Chappell is saying that the LBW law should be reviewed as well. Simply saying he really wants to have anything that is pitching and hitting the stumps to be reviewed and have the ability to be called as out. So if it's going on to hit the stumps, if it's pitched outside leg or it's pitched outside off, doesn't matter. It's going on to hit the stumps, it's out. Currently, the law allows for a player with the ball landing outside leg stump simply to kick the ball away. Under the Chappell law, that would be eliminated. This would mean that batsmen are then going to have to start changing the game up. And if you think about it, basically what you're looking at is batsmen opening up their stance more. Now, the original law around ball pitching outside leg stump not being able to be given out LBW goes back to it to eliminate negative play. Now, bit of editorial here. I'm not in favour of this. Being a left-handed batsman, you come up against this a lot, where it's very hard to get your bat around the front of your pad. It's not as easy as it seems. Even opening up the pad, opening up your stance is going to make that more difficult. So I'm not a fan of it. No, when I was bowling, we had an opportunity one time. Team needed 6 runs and over, and I basically bowled at his legs, came around the wicket, bowled at his legs, and he just couldn't get the bat there quick enough to be able to get it. He's got singles coming off the pads, and that's about it. To me, it's actually a positive thing to not have LBWs applicable when it pitches outside leg, not the opposite. But we'll see what happens. It's something that Chappelli has put forward. His brothers already changed laws on the field, old Greg and Trevor, when they bowled the ball underarm. So we'll see where this goes, eh? And from India, Suresh Raina and a few fellow players are calling for the BCCI to allow non-contracted players to play outside of the IPL tournaments. Now, currently, all players from India need exemption to play in non-BCCI sanctioned events. This includes non-contracted players. Example, Yusuf Pathan, who was not in the international squad consideration, had initially been granted to the ability to go play in the Hong Kong Blitz. Now, that was later revoked. Now, what they're saying is with the IPL obviously not going ahead this year, or hugely in doubt whether it will be played later in the year, to let non-contracted players go and play in other tournaments outside of India so that they can earn some money, which seems like a fair idea. It seems rather unfair to have a non-contracted player that still has to abide by the heavy-handed rules of the BCCI. And just in news from the ECB, hoping to resume play on July the 8th. Now, that might seem a bit optimistic. However, that's what they're sort of hoping for. If it does go ahead, it'll all be behind closed doors. Currently, they've aimed at 2 grounds that have on-site accommodation. It's the AGS Bowl and Emirates Old Trafford. Both have hotels on site. So what they would be looking at is they would have all of the players, all of the support staff staying on site, and obviously the bubble would be the ground, and everybody playing there wouldn't leave. They'd only be playing the game. The associated hanger-on, obviously, with broadcast people as well. Now, what they're looking at is 6 tests in total at these 2 grounds, 3 against West Indies, 3 against Pakistan. that is all to be hopefully kicked off 8th of July. They are looking at other grounds, but they have to make sure that they meet the biosecurity requirements, which is effectively having a hotel close enough so as that there is no interaction with anybody outside of the playing or the associated playing bubble. So, Paul, that's the very limited cricket news that we have at the moment, and I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Archwin, for that. We'll move on now to the rugby news. We mentioned the other day that over in England, they're looking at a no-contact game style for grassroots. And we've seen, as I say, responses to that saying, hey, I'd rather give up the game than play that, or I'd much rather play that style. Ian McGeechan has come out with a good point saying, look, it's this or no rugby at all. And would we like to see a whole bunch of grassroots clubs go under? And we've been talking from a New Zealand point of view, how important it is to get money over the bar and to get memberships paid. So to keep those clubs running. So remember, 99% of all rugby is amateur, run by volunteers and financially supported by members and local businesses, he says, or in his opinion piece. And you've got to say that, yeah, that makes good sense there. That look, even if it's might not be rugby as we know it, we need something to help keep these clubs alive. Also, it's good to see that Tony Lewis down in Tasman are getting themselves in place to resume their rugby. A report has come out down there about how they are looking at resuming this month. And he has said, look, that all clubs have to be on board. We have to do it with the agreement of the clubs, not impose some sort of rules on them. It may mean that because they're having to police how many people can be at the grounds, that they have to host all their games at Nelson's Trafalgar Park, Blenheim's Lansdowne Park, and also Sports Park at Monte Ikua. Sorry about the mispronunciation there. And that maybe that they have to hold it at a limited number of grounds instead of using all of the club's grounds. We'll have to see how it goes. As I say, getting some form of game up is important, I think. So if you want to hear from Tony Lewis, then go back and have a look at the long talk where I had an hour-long chat with him about rugby down in Tasman. You can get that on our Facebook page, New Zealand Sports Radio, or you can, if you prefer to listen, check out the podcast. Just search for New Zealand Sport Radio on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favourite pod catcher. And now I'm going to hand you back to Stephen Harris, who's going to take us through the league news and that big money deal.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Now, despite all the jousting that's gone on between the NRL and the broadcasters in the last few weeks or so, the NRL expects to sign off one of the longest broadcast deals in Australian sport within days, reportedly set to net the cash-strapped organisation close to $2.3 million. ARL Commission Chairman Peter V'landys has told News Corp that his aim is to reach an agreement on a 7-year deal with Nine and Foxtel by Friday. The revamped contract would cover the remaining 3 years of the NRL's existing deal, which is at $1.8 billion for 2018 through to 2022, plus a 4-season extension until the end of 2026. Both partners have acted in great faith, and I believe that we're very close. The loyalty factor has been important because you want to look after your partners who have been with the game for a long time, V'landys said. The negotiated deal would secure the NRL's long-term financial viability and should guarantee the future of all 16 clubs amid the uncertainty of the COVID-19 crisis. The annual payments would include a discounted rate for 2020 season due to the shortened 20 regular round campaign, which is planned for its restart in a couple of weeks' time. The developments are a huge boost for the NRL after Nine CEO Hugh Marks recently declared it wasn't that rugby league, it was part of the network's future. And finally, in league news, now referees won't rule out strike over one ref proposal. Frustrated NRL referees won't rule out strike action over a proposal to cut the number of whistleblowers on the field this season. But first, they just want to be included in discussions. Professional Rugby League match official chairman Silvio Del Vecchio confirmed on Sunday the referees were not consulted before the proposal to go from 2 referees to 1 was discussed at the Project Apollo meeting on Friday. Del Vecchio said the lack of consultation was disrespectful, and while a strike was not currently being considered with the season set to restart in just 18 days, the option was there. Industrial action is certainly something that is on the list of things, but if you're starting at position 0 and end up in position 10, then industrial action may be at number 10, he told AAP. First and foremost, we want to engage with the NRL, talk to them about how they come up with this decision, where they go from here. And that's pretty much it in league news this morning. Always something happening. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Yes, there is always something happening. And yes, it is a bumper show today. I'll rush through these last ones. But New Zealand Athletics Chiefs say that it might be back to the future for the way that they're qualifying. We already have 7 athletes qualified for Tokyo. In the shot put, we have Tom Walsh, Dame Valerie Adams, and Jacko Gill. Marathon runners Zane Robertson and Malcolm Hicks, and distance runner Camille Bouchum and race walker Quentin Roux have all already qualified for the Olympics. To quote Goodman, our athletes will have ample opportunities to qualify. Some distance runners may say they need racers with perfect pacing to drag them through, but for inlane racing and a field event, if it's a quality event with good conditions, you've got an opportunity to get performance on board. What he means there by plenty of opportunities is that they'll be looking at having Trans-Tasman events, as there probably won't be the opportunities to go across to there. Sorry about sneeze there. Sorry about interruption for sneezing. To go across to Europe to qualify. To finish his quote, for our domestic-based athletes, I think we'll be saying, if you haven't got performances on board by the end of March, we won't conditionally select you. There'll be a small handful who genuinely need the extra bit of time, and we'll leave the window open for them. Obviously, injuries, etc., might impact that. Going over to Major League Baseball in the States, they're looking at beginning their season in early July and having an extended off-season. This is causing issues with the Players Association, who say, look, why are we having a reduced regular season and then extended off-season? Why can't we just have the full season? Because they are getting paid pro-rated for regular season games, not for post-season games. So some question marks there around the owners. Are they trying to pull a fast one to pay the players less? So having seen industrial action happen before, as Stephen was mentioning there in the NRL, having happened before over in the States, let's hope it doesn't come to that, and they see sense between them. Those sports have got lots and lots of cash in them, let's be honest. In the America's Cup, we're expecting to see the teams aren't going to see each other racing because of those 2 cancelled events in Europe, and also with the reduced time for development. We could see some speed differences that we wouldn't have expected otherwise come the cups in around Christmas. The Team New Zealand say, look, they're happy with their simulators and with their development. They say, yes, they're impacted, but they don't believe they're impacted more than anybody else, and that it's sort of fair across the small fleet of 4 boats. In greyhound racing on Sunday, they had to cancel the last 2 races of the meeting because of a fire in a shed. All the dogs were put in their trailers quickly, and luckily, because there weren't any spectators there whilst it was a bit hectic, it was all done under control, and 2 fire engines got out there to sort out the problem. It looks like they'll be back to racing pretty soon in Auckland. They were the first greyhound racing up with the first racing people to get themselves back up and running. They said, look, everyone has been behaving themselves because they realise that if people do not stick by all the rules, that they may have to stop racing entirely. So they're seeing that everyone is complying and keeping to all of the lockdown and social distancing laws there. Finally, we have a record has been broken in the in skateboarding It's an 11-year-old that's broken the record. How Tony Hawks, famously back in 1999, managed a 900-degree spin on the vertical. He was 31 when he achieved that. 11-year-old Brazilian skateboarder Gio Curry has managed a 180 degree spin on the vertical ramp. That is obviously a new record, I say, and it's taken over 20 years for that record to be broken. So congratulations to him. He was the youngest ever competitor at the X Games last year when he equaled that 900-degree spin in competition. But now he's gone 180 degrees further. So congratulations to him in making that feat. So thank you, everybody who has joined us. Don't forget to like the Facebook page, New Zealand Sports Radio. It has been fantastic, the amount of growth we've had over the opening sort of 4, I guess getting on towards 5 weeks now that we have been alive. Thank you so much, everyone who has watched and listened. Don't forget, you can listen on the podcast. Just search for New Zealand Sports Radio over on iTunes, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, plus other podcatchers are available. Tomorrow night, we will have the Hash Rugby chat, where we'll be discussing the New Zealand finances. Obviously, last week we got news as to what the books looked like at the annual sort of general meeting, and how much money is spent on different pieces of it. So we'll discuss that. Also, it came out over the weekend that New Zealand Rugby are looking at potentially cutting half of their 180 staff across the country. So we'll also be discussing that as well. So that'll be the big news that we'll be discussing in Hash Rugby Chat tomorrow evening. Don't forget, on Wednesday also at 8 p.m. we have Do You Know Sport? And we have room for one more team. So if you have got a mate, why not get in touch and take part? It is a fun sports quiz. It's the best sports quiz on New Zealand Radio. It's the only sports quiz on New Zealand Radio. And you win the biggest prize, which is bragging rights. Thank you, everybody. It's been a bit long today. Don't worry, we'll try and keep it down to 20 minutes going forwards.